Welcome to part three of our discussion of the history of racism. Where we left off last time is how the decision made by the Pope in 1452 to declassify Africans as less than human created this business of chattel slavery. Chattel slavery was qualitatively different than all the types of slavery that had happened before or were happening around the world. It allowed slavers to dehumanize Africa and therefore treat them like animals. And that ideology then spread. We know that Columbus enslaved the people of the Caribbean, and as early as 1505, black African slaves were being brought to the Caribbean. We have the first slaves in North America in 1619, 20 to 30 slaves brought to uh, Virginia, beginning the real kind of transatlantic slave trade as we know it. What I wanted to focus on in this part is the dehumanization led to incredible brutality in the slave trade, that people were murdered and tortured and ripped away from their children, and it was centuries of brutality. 12,000 slave ships kidnapped and brought people across the Atlantic. Nearly 2 million of those slaves died in transit. In fact, there are stories because the slave traders and the captains kept logs of schools of sharks following the slave ships. And when a slave would get sick, a sick slave could contaminate the rest of the slaves, or if a slave started coughing, they would just throw them overboard to the sharks. The brutality is hard to describe, but I'll kind of describe the effect of it. When I was teaching my race and ethnicity class at the University of Oregon with 170 students, including a lot of football players, African American football players, when I'm going through how brutal this was, including slave mothers killing their babies so they didn't have to be raised as slaves, I saw these big, strong black men start to weep. And I had to stop the class because the trauma of that endures to this day. The incredible brutality of dehumanization. So here's the point that I want to make. I'm not going to get into the details because you can read them for yourselves or go to the Smithsonian Museum of African American History while it's still open, because I know Trump wants to close it. Did that trauma just end magically in 1865 when the Civil War ended and the slaves were freed? Did that ideology of African African Americans and people from Africa as less than human, did that mentality, did that ideology, did that belief system just magically go poof in 1865 and everything was good in the hood and everything was even Steven? We'll talk about that next. Welcome to the Resistance.